Hey, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Brett Barons here and Marley Weirda at the WCIA3 studios discussing a big day for high school athletes, coaches, fans, just everyone in particular, parents that follows high school sports. For us, even in the media, we're all excited that high school sports are back, and the surprise announcement that Governor Pritzker and the IDPH made this afternoon that all of a sudden, after 10 months of being questioning what's going to happen with sports at the high school and youth level, here we are today on January 22nd, 2021, with high school sports and a picture, Marley, for what could come here for all Phase 4 regions. I don't know about you, but this caught me completely by surprise today.
Yeah, this was absolutely way out of left field. I remember coming in this morning, haven't even gone on Twitter yet, and you're like, "It's a big day, weirdo." I'm like, "What happened?" They're like, "High school sports are back." I'm like, "All of them?" You're like, "Yeah, all of them." I'm like, "To play?" You're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh my gosh." So, needless to say, I was surprised as well. Definitely a surprise announcement. They're coming from Pritzker, and I just couldn't be happier for these high school athletes. I think they've waited long enough to get their shot, and it must have been tough for them seeing all these other teams across the country getting to play and them just kind of being on the outside looking in. So I'm just really happy for all of the athletes, coaches, athletic director, parents that get to participate in this season, which we didn't see coming. So definitely a surprise.
Yeah, I think a big smile on a lot of people's faces today, including mine, and I think that's great to see for so many. I can't even imagine what these last 10 months, and especially the last couple of months here, since all sports have been on pause since November 20th. And it was a week ago tonight that we were sitting here with some hope for these lower risk sports that they were going to be able to play, especially in the winter. And for us here in Central Illinois and the sports that we cover, that mainly pertain to boys swimming and diving, that they would get a chance. And I felt really strongly about that from a week ago and the new guidance that came out then. And then this morning, I got some word from a few people that would know that were saying, hey, look, the IHSA and IESA for middle school sports is meeting with the IDPH at 11:30 this morning before Governor Pritzker's noon press conference. And they have not had great communication this whole time during COVID. And so the fact that they were just meeting today led me to believe that maybe something was moving and shaking behind the scenes. Didn't expect it to be a full-on all sports green lighted here. But then I kept hearing things that this could be some positive momentum for getting sports back. Once again, not thinking football and basketball and wrestling, the three higher risk sports that I think most people follow in that grouping, would get a okay to play. And yet here we are at 9:15 at night, Marley, and there is a path towards playing. Now, we must preface all of this that it has to be in Phase 4, and regions 3, 5, and 6 are all in Phase 4, which include the Springfield area and west and all of central Illinois in the WCIA3 viewing area. And I categorize that from the north, Watseka to Danville, Decatur, all the way down to Effingham, and even reaching to Olney, which is not in the WCIA3 viewing area, but the far stretch of Effingham, which is in our viewing area. They're all in Region 6, and that is in Phase 4, meaning, hey, you're ready to play. That's not just baseball, softball, lower risk sports. This is football, basketball, wrestling, soccer. Boys soccer is still to come. Girls soccer is still to come. Volleyball, which is indoors. And Marley, for me, it was always about the indoor sports, and football certainly because there's so much contact in that. But could we play basketball? Could we see that indoors? And being that there's so much close contact there, and especially for wrestling, which had already agreed to move its season to the summer, I didn't think there was any chance we would see that, maybe even in the summer. And yet here we are, and there's a pathway to play.
Yeah, especially when we were in the stages of the tiers where it was, tier 1, 2, and 3. And for the high risk sports, when they were in essentially the best tier, tier 1, which we were in just on Monday, they were only allowed to scrimmage, which I had spoken to the high school the head basketball coach at Tuscola. And, he said, I really didn't have any hope until, we were in tier 1. It didn't give me a ton of hope, but it gave me a little bit of an ounce of hope. But even in that moment, I don't think I was confident that there was going to be high school basketball or football or any of the high risk sports, just because if we were in essentially the best tier and they were still only allowed to scrimmage, what difference does that make from where we were back in the summer when we were in phase 4? And I think the surprising thing about this as well, Brett, is that we are in phase 4 and that sports are able to compete pretty much to their full extent, but our positivity rates are higher than they were in the summer when they said no high risk sports, we're going to move all that around, which was an interesting thing. And you pointed out on your Twitter, Brett. So I guess I'm curious what you think of why this decision was made now when essentially things are worse.
And that's my big question out of all of this. I didn't have a chance to ask Governor Pritzker that today. We didn't see this coming. I would have submitted a question request to his press secretary and hope that would have been relayed to him today during his press conference if I would have had any inclination that all sports were going to get this green light. And that's certainly something we're going to follow up on. But when I did a little bit of research on this, Marley, it was just interesting to me that here we sit and the numbers are 2 days behind. That's the most updated. So on 1/19, so 3 days ago now, there was a 7.1 positivity rate with a 7-day rolling average of 5.9% for Region 6. This is only for Region 6. You look back to September 19th, and our numbers were at 6.2 and 5.3. So better on the numbers, and yet here we are how many months later and we're not playing. And the 7-day rolling average numbers for the ICU bed availability for Region 6 from the same time as above, and I went all the way back to August. In August, our positivity rate 4.5% on August 19th, which is just a couple of weeks after they decided to punt the football season. And then your ICU bed availability, which is also important and a factor in this and how they determine what mitigations your region is in. In August, there were 46% bed availability for ICU beds in Region 6. Now there's only 30%. So the numbers have gone down since then. There are less ICU beds available right now on and once again, this is dated a couple of days. This is the latest numbers they provide on the IDPH website. But we are in worse percent. There are less ICU beds available right now, this is what the numbers say, than we had in August. So where does it give? There's got to be something in this that gives, and a lot of people want to make it political. And look, that's fine. You can have those beliefs if you want. I'm going to stay out of all of that. I'm just telling you what the numbers are here today and why I am so shocked that we're sitting here talking about all sports available to play. And I'd love to get your response on this and leave a comment on here. We'll get to a couple of them as we move along here. But, you know, how do you feel? What are the reasons behind this? Those are just what the numbers say. And that's what I'm here to do, is provide the numbers. And to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think at this point, it was probably just, you know, they were running out of time and they needed to make a decision, because if they got to, let's say, March and there was still no high school sports going on, I think it would have been difficult for them to allow some of them to go, and maybe others didn't get the chance in that sense. But because there is this time crunch right now, I spoke to a couple athletes and athletic directors today, and that it's going to be a very quick turnaround for a season. Usually they have, you know, a month or so to prepare. You know, they have all these contact days before, but these athletes have been on pause for a couple months now, and they're going to have to turn around and play a season, I can imagine, in 2 or 3 weeks, maybe. I guess that would be my prediction. So a lot of them said, you know, they're obviously happy to be out on the court or the field, whatever it takes, but that's still going to be tough to do. And especially for athletes who are multi-sport athletes. And across the viewing area, Brett, we have so many athletes like that play basketball, baseball, football, volleyball. I mean, they're multi-talented athletes. So will they get the opportunity to play all of their seasons? I can imagine there will be a little bit of overlap, or maybe they'll condense the seasons. I don't know yet. That's still information that we're waiting for from the IHSA, but that's just kind of my question marks that I have here with the season.
And we're going to find out more on Wednesday. The IHSA did announce that today in its formal email that they sent out to the media and to the
Mhm.
public, saying that the next regularly scheduled board meeting is Wednesday, which we already knew, January 27th. That was already going to be a big meeting in terms of moving forward and what their plans were. Like you mentioned, we're getting to a point here, or we were before this news came out today, where you've got to either make a decision, cancel. You just can't keep kicking the can down the road any
Mhm.
further here because all these sports are starting to back up. Now it's positive. And in my comments earlier, Marley, were meant to be positive in that sense. Look, I'm super happy today for these kids, for these coaches,
100%.
for these parents, for everyone involved that these kids are going to get that opportunity. That is first and foremost today, that this is about the kids, that they get an opportunity to suit up, one they've been waiting so long for. And I can't even imagine trying to be in that position. You work so hard, no matter what the sport is,
Mhm.
to get an opportunity to compete and to play. And you only get a couple of those chances, a couple of years. Most of these kids are not 4-year starters on varsity. They're going to have all these games and everything else. If you're like most kids, it's maybe a junior and senior year, maybe just a senior year that you get an opportunity. And so that is my first and foremost thought today, that it's about the kids. But when you start looking at the nitty gritty and some of the details here, you just can't help but look at it and go, how close were they to canceling this whole thing? And I've been told by a
Mhm.
few people, this hasn't been confirmed by anybody at the IHSA or whatever else, but they were getting close here to a point where basketball season was going to have to be canceled because you
Right.
just can't keep pushing it any farther down the road. And now the question becomes, what do you do with all of these seasons in a shortened amount of time? You've got football, you've got basketball, you have got wrestling, still both soccers that haven't played, baseball, softball, and track and field as well. Don't you want to prioritize the spring sports that were already canceled once? I would think that has got to be a big decision that they're going to have to face here. And how do you juggle all these? They're going to be shortened seasons. That much I know 100%. I can sit here and tell you that there's not going to be a 4-month football season leading up to a state title game like there normally is, where the games start the last weekend of August and end on Thanksgiving. That is just
Yeah.
not going to happen here because there's not that much time. But when you look at some of the details that they laid out today, and we'll pull this graph up here so we can see together, and this basically breaks it all down by levels, by phases, and by risks of sports here. So you have your lower risk sports in the bottom left-hand corner. Those are in gray. Lower, medium, and higher risk sports. Your higher risk sports, like we mentioned, football, basketball, and wrestling. In that medium risk sports for outdoors, which are soccer. That's going to be your big one for medium risk
Mhm.
outdoors. Those are level 4, as you can see. That means that tournaments, out of conference league play, out of state play allowed, and a championship game allowed. That means we could see a state championship for soccer, which would be great for those athletes. Level 3 for sport played indoors, which is volleyball, is a medium risk sport. That is still at level 3, meaning they are not allowed to have a state championship right now. Level 3 for higher risk sport means they can play intra-conference or intra-EMS region, which simply means that they can play teams in their conference or in the region. So Region 6 is what we're in. You could have any teams in that area play each other, no problem at all. Or
Yeah.
if you're in your conference, and this is what becomes very interesting here, Marley, because you've got a conference like the Big 12, which is spread across Danville, Champaign, Bloomington, and Peoria. Those are different regions, and yet they are allowed to
Yeah.
play because they are still in the same conference. They are not going to have a state championship as of right now. So we could see some playoff football, but it's going to be more like a regional or sectional. You're not going to see a state title playoff football tournament right now. And then level 4 for lower risk sports, all of this in phase 4, and that is so important as we remember this. You have to be in phase 4 to be eligible to play right now. Much of Chicago and the Metro East does not fit into this category yet, meaning this does not pertain to them. But level 4 lower risk sports means that they're going to be able to essentially do everything that they did before, but it will be interesting to see how long their seasons are. So this is the breakdowns. This is all new today in terms of including phase 4 in the bottom gray graph here on sports risk and what the level is from phase 4 to tier 1, tier 2 to tier 3. The top part in the blue graph has stayed the same. And this is essentially what it's been like since they announced the sports guidance earlier this year. I know that's a lot to process in a short amount of time, but that's where we're at right now with where they've moved forward here. And like I mentioned earlier on, Marley, just a week ago, we were sitting here with trying to figure out what is tier one, what is tier two, what is tier three, and how it pertains to sports. What does phase four even mean? And this time last week, we had no idea what phase four meant. There was no
Yeah.
guidance from the IDPH or governor's office or IHSA. They were just waiting on a trickle down effect there to even figure out what that meant. And yet here we are 7 days later, and all sports are now okay.
Right. And I'm glad that they were prepared with these phase four guidelines and they were able to put them out, because so much of this year has just been the waiting game for another board meeting or for another announcement. And right now, time is of the essence. So the IHSA and the IDPH need to have all their ducks in line right now, so that this high school season can get off the ground, because I'm sure athletic directors are waiting for a little bit of guidance for them. I can't imagine what they're going to have to go through right now as far as scheduling and figuring out spectators and arranging gym time, field time, and going through all that in a short amount of time, because usually these guys have probably the whole summer to figure this out, whereas now they're going to have a couple weeks to do it.
And some good points coming in here. LeConte Nix, central coach on multiple sports, saying, what about coaches that coach multiple sports? Absolutely. I think that's a huge concern here. You're going to be going from sport to sport as we move along. Officials are a huge concern. I can't even begin to put into words how important that is to get officials and referees, umpires for baseball, softball, all of this. That is going to be key, because you can't play if you don't have somebody to officiate the games. And a large population of our officials, referees in this area, and I would say mostly across the country, are older. Are there going to be enough officials to play matches? I think that is very, very important in all of this. I put this up there already, but Brian wants to know what happened to the science driving the restriction. Yep, that's the same question I have, because the numbers are worse than we were even a few months ago. Another comment here from Nikki. You are being too nice. Perhaps it was Illinois leaders finally saw other states playing sports successfully, or perhaps, and much more likely, it is highly political timing. Look, like I said, it's not my job to get into the politics of all of this. I'll just present you with the numbers. You can decide yourself if you want to make it about politics. Do I doubt that some of it has to do with that? No, not at all. I think it does. But when all other states around Illinois have been playing and doing it successfully, and we've been asking these questions. I know a lot of people want to say, well, why isn't the media asking Pritzker or Dr. Ezike about it? We've been asking these questions, and they're just saying it's about the science and the numbers, and they don't support it. And all along, I've just measured that they weren't going to change, that this is what they believe to be safe. And for whatever reason today, they made the decision to move forward. Once again, you can surmise whatever you want to about that. I will stick to the numbers and believe what I believe through that. So, something did change. What is it? I look forward to asking Governor Pritzker or following up with about what that may be. But, there are way more questions now, I think, with some certain things, but these are questions about details. And you can't figure out questions about details if you're not playing. So the fact that we're playing is big-time progress for me to just get to this point today. And Marley, you chatted with several people around the area. You were on the Zoom call lineup today. What was your biggest takeaway from talking with so many athletes and coaches and ADs about today's news?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, they were just all so excited. But the biggest thing that I just kind of realized is that they're willing to play no matter what. They know it's going to be a difficult stretch ahead of them. Some athletes might have to choose between two sports, because right now we're crunched into 2-3 seasons, what it seems like. They're going to have to play with masks on. I mean, all of these challenges that come with it, obviously they wouldn't like to deal with this stuff, but they're going to do it because of their love for the game, their passion for their sport. They just want this chance, and they're desperate to play. I mean, they haven't done so in months, and they're just willing to do it all. Whatever it brings, they're going to do it to get that chance to play.
I love it. Here is Arcola athletic director and football coach Nick Lindsay on today's events and just hearing this great news for him.
I hope whatever they put out, I just hope that it's fair for our athletes. I hope that they don't make athletes decide between two sports, whether that means shortened seasons or whatever it is. A school like us, we have a ton of multi-sport athletes, and all of our coaches want kids doing all the sports that they can. So, that's the biggest thing I think is keeping the kids' best interest in mind, and not focusing on what the big school single sport athletes might do, and having an idea for our kids too.
And I had asked him in that question, what are you hoping to see from the IHSA? Is there any kind of guidance or anything that you would want to see from them that maybe you haven't in the past couple months? And I mean, he said it perfectly, just putting the kids first, because at the end of the day, they're the ones on the court or the field. And they deserve it. So very well said by AD and head football coach Nick Lindsay.
Yeah, I think he's spot on with so many smaller schools in our area, which encompass most of our high schools in the WCIA3 viewing area. I would say less than 400 kids would fit that. A couple of things in here, Marley. You mentioned the kids are going to have to wear masks. Yes, that's 100% true. While practicing, while competing, is that going to be uncomfortable for some? Yes. Is that going to be hard to deal with? Absolutely. Are 99% of kids willing to do it to play? That's a resounding yes. I will tell you that they are okay with that as long as they get to play. And yes, it might not be ideal playing basketball with a mask on or football under your helmet. I'm not even sure how that's going to work.
Yeah, I was talking to some of the football players and they said, like, okay, we're going to have like the chin strap, but the mask, like, do we put the chin strap over the mask or the mask over the chin strap? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it'll just be a face shield. Who knows?
Right. There's going to be some details to work out, like I mentioned, but the fact we're talking about details of playing is a huge step in the right direction for so many today, and that's what makes me happy, is that these athletes are going to have a chance. So once again, phase 4 only in all of this. There are some regions across the state, including over by Bloomington, Peoria, and further west, that I think will move into these phase 4 categories pretty soon here, maybe even possibly as this weekend. Chicago is a whole different bear, and I'm not even going to try and pretend like I understand how all of that works up there with CPS and moving forward and trying to get practices, games, everything else. They haven't even been in school, which is another question in all of this, Marley, is if you're not in-person learning, are they going to allow sports? And some schools in our area, Central, Centennial, Danville, Decatur schools are bigger schools. I think that's a real question. And then those leaders at those districts and those units are going to have to make decisions moving forward with that. We mentioned the schedules will be set during the board meeting next Wednesday. All eyes will be on that and what comes out. Low-risk winter sports must practice 7 days prior to their first game. They have already been practicing here, so those are going to happen pretty quick, I think. And I feel pretty confident, Marley, in saying that those winter sports are going to get started here within maybe even a week or so. And we could see basketball here coming up in a couple of weeks, but basketball must have 12 days of practice before a game. Fall, spring, summer sports can begin contact days on Monday, which is important to get those athletes that maybe don't play a winter sport going and getting back into lifting and practicing and doing all of those sorts of things. As far as spectators, in Region 4, a maximum of 50 spectators will be allowed. That does not count the players on the court, coaches, workers for the game. This is only family members or spectators or whoever. And this is all dependent on each school. So they can decide if they want to be more restrictive and have nobody in there, or they can have some. But 50 is the max spectator limit for Phase 4 regions. Tier 1 regions, maximum of 25. Tier 2 regions, no spectators allowed. Masks must be worn by the spectators at all times for indoors. Outdoors is going to be a little different for that, along with, all the people on the bench, personnel working at the game, administrators, everything else. All of those folks are also going to have to be wearing masks, which shouldn't come as a surprise, as we have been doing this for 10 months now. So my plea to everyone is just for these kids, now that they have this opportunity, mask up, social distance, wash your hands, do the best you can do to help these kids get this opportunity to get to play. Because if we move back out of Phase 4, sports are once again in jeopardy and we're going to be where we were yesterday, looking at this thing going, are we going to get to play, especially these high-risk sports? And so I know I'm going to do my part as best as I can to see this. It not only helps me professionally and you, obviously, we want to cover these kids. We want to tell their stories.
Yeah.
We want to be at the games and give highlights and talk to athletes and share, their moments and their time to be in the spotlight. But I just feel good for it personally, too. So, I'm going to do my part, and I know you will too, Marley, to just get these kids back competing and give them a chance to do the things that they love.
Oh, most definitely. And Brett, I already counted. If basketball teams started practice tomorrow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's our 12 days in. We should see basketball by February 4th. Not that I'm counting, but
okay.
We could see it. That's my prediction. If they started tomorrow and they get their 12 days.
Yeah.
That's all dependent, of course, on what the IHSA says, but
right. And
that would be the soonest we could see it.
Could start on and they've already had some contact days, like Andy Olson was out at Mahomet basketball practice and at Tri-County for the girls, Mahomet for the boys. They're already starting to do some contact days. Sounds like they're going to have 12 practices, essentially an acclimatization period, and that's going to be the same thing for football. It's not like they're just going to jump in to full pads in football and start tackling and doing all of these things. It's a slow build up, and that's nothing new. It's what they've always done. It's just now when there's a rush to get everything in, the IHSA is going to have to make some decisions here about schedules and when they're going to go. Football was supposed to start practice on February 15th. It was considered a quote-unquote spring sport, moved from the fall. So we'll see what they do with football and moving it around, if they do it all. With basketball, certainly, I would expect them to start basketball before football, maybe postpone football a little bit. Maybe 6 to 7 week seasons. That would be my guess here to try and fit all of these in, because when you start looking at the calendar here in January, you have 4 or 5 months here, maybe max, if you're going to extend this thing into July. My guess would be they want to be done with all of this year by June 30th. Or is there 30 days in June, Marley? I'm terrible at that.
I don't know. People know all the tricks. They're like,
I got nothing.
Hold on, let me look right now.
There's 30 days in June. So
you are correct.
My guess would be they want to be done with the 2020-2021 school year, quote unquote, for sports by June 30th. So that doesn't give us much time here. That's 4 months to get all this stuff in. And when you're trying to compress it all together, they're going to have to make some tough decisions. But that's what the Board of Trustees has been pegged to do here. And I know they're going to be happy to do it because they have been given permission by Governor Pritzker and the IDPH to do so. Marley, final thoughts here as we wrap up on a good day?
No, just that. It was really a good day. I'm excited to cover high school sports again. It seems like forever since we've been to like a high school football game or a basketball. And I'm grateful we got, some of the fall sports that we did, because it was a lot of fun just to go to some of those different sports that maybe we wouldn't have covered as much if we had been busy with football in the fall. So it was cool to, get our rounds at girls golf, tennis, swimming, but I'm excited for these athletes just to get their chance, because they deserve it. They've stuck through it. And now they finally get to go out and compete, with, at the end of the day, is what they wanted to do all along. So happy for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And you raised a good point there that some lower risk sports were able to play in the fall. Golf, cross country also in there as well. They unfortunately did not get to compete at state and have a state tournament. I would have loved to have seen that for those sports, but at least they were able to compete, and that's better than nothing. Yeah. So, this is a positive step for so many today, and I am happy for them first and foremost, and I hope that everybody can do their part to help these kids continue to get this opportunity. Today came out of nowhere. It shocked the heck out of me today to log on to Governor Pritzker's press conference at noon and say that there was going to be some updated guidance, and hearing Dr. Ezike say that sports were back on was pretty cool for me. And this is what she said today to clarify it. Here's Dr. Ezike during the press conference today.
If you're in phase 4, you can absolutely practice and play basketball.
That's it. She said that, and I said, sports are back. I got a lot of questions, but sports are back.
I love like the cutoff question there of that reporter, like, so they can play games,
Yeah, everyone was just
which
so
I think was
shocked.
like
What?
so wait, they can play like all the way, like every sport
Yes.
can play games in
Football,
Facebook?
like wrestling,
What?
all of these
Really?
things. All of these things. You can do all of these things. Came out of nowhere.
We were in denial for so long, and here we are, like, what? The day comes, and we're like, we don't
Man.
know what to do.
If you would have given me the chance, or if you'd have just said, what are the chances that they play basketball or football, I would have told you less than 10%
Yeah.
probably. At this point, I just did not see it coming. I was hopeful. I was trying to be cautiously optimistic that in some way, form, or fashion, this could happen. And here we are. Jessica asked a good question here as we wrap up. Can we practice 7 days a week? No, you can't. You got to take one day off, which is Sunday. So only 6 days
Maybe
a
my
week. I'm sure all the athletes
were incorrect.
would sign up for 6-7 days a week if they could, but you got to take one day a week off. High schools can't practice on Sunday. So there's one more. Eric raises a good point here too. Smaller schools will not be able to play multiple sports at once. Shortened seasons are the only way. There are going to be shortened seasons. You're not going to have a 3-4 month season here. That's just not going to happen. My guess, like I mentioned earlier, would be 6, 7, 8 weeks max for all of these seasons to try and get them in. Marley, thanks so much. It's been fun here on a good day. It's so good to finally talk about positive news for high school sports in the state of Illinois. After all of the states around Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri all playing high school sports, and now Illinois athletes finally get that chance. That feels dang good to say.
It does. I wouldn't believe it. Like, if you would have told me a couple weeks ago that we would have been doing this, I'd be like, no way, no way. But here we are.
Here we are. All right, Marley, thanks. We'll have much more coverage coming up on the news in about 30 minutes from now on WCIA 3 News at 10. Marley's going to have continuing coverage all weekend, talk to a ton of athletes today from around the area. Arcola, Central A&M, Paxton, Shelbyville. Where else, Marley?
Yep,
Where else
Shelbyville.
Tri-County. Am I missing one?
Gosh, it's all blurring together. I
think that's it.
That was it. I think that was it.
Okay, that's a lot. We tried to get to
spread
as
them
many
out.
different schools around
Yeah.
the area as we could to get some reaction. We'll start breaking down all these details coming up here. All looking forward to next Wednesday in the IHSA Board of Directors meeting and announcing schedules and figuring out when sports are going to be back at which times. For Marley, I'm Brett. Thanks so much for watching. On a positive day, please do your part to mask up, wash hands, social distance so we can give these kids a chance to compete this year.